Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of The Democratic View. And today I am here with a lady who knows an awful lot about light. And her name is Susan Harder, and she's going to tell us all about how to have the proper lighting around your house. And why, I might add.
Yeah.
So start by telling us a little bit about you. Give us a thumbnail sketch of who you are and how you got involved in all this stuff.
Well, I've been living in East Hampton for about 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I was previously in Manhattan, where I was an art consultant, and I was a art dealer. I had a gallery on 57th Street.
Oh.
And I represented some very famous photographers. A lot of people know Ansel Adams, but I also represented Andre Kertész, Harry Callahan, Aaron Siskin. My background is in art history. So I got to a certain point where I retired and came out to East Hampton, and I live in a glass house. So when my neighbor's lights were shining in my window, I made a mistake. I went over and I banged on her door. You know, I was angry by then, which is what happens when you're intruded with light. It's like trespass.
Yes, I know
and now,
the feeling.
I know better now that what you do is, if you have an issue, you need to have a solution before you have a complaint. So I work primarily on solving solutions to what we refer to as light pollution. Now, light pollution is not all light. It's only light that is misdirected, excessive, or unnecessary or redundant. For example, I mean, light pollution can even be during the day because, for example, I was at Waldbaum's yesterday during the day, and all their heavy-duty floodlights were on in the parking lot during the day. So what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is...
Waste energy, for one.
Well, compounded with the fact that most electrical energy is generated by burning fossil fuels.
Yes.
This, of course, causes air pollution, water pollution, it pollutes the land, and creates the global warming problem that we have. You know, we just came off of, you know, our one-year anniversary of Sandy, which is a huge wake-up call for us to use energy wisely, to plan ahead, and to generate electricity wisely. So, you know, these are all things we need to pay attention to. But in terms of my interest in outdoor lighting, I was talking to my neighbor at the time across the street, Davis Sobel, who you know. She wrote Galileo's Daughter, Longitude, which was turned into a film with Jeremy Lyons. And Davis said, well, you know, if light pollution bothers you, you should join the International Dark Sky Association. And you had asked me, how did that organization begin?
How did it come into being?
It came into being about 25 or 30 years ago in Tucson, Arizona, which if you've ever been there, you know that it's surrounded by mountains on top of which are professional observatories. And the astronomers, and of course that's a big ecotourism event out there, but the astronomers noticed that when light goes up from unshielded fixtures, that it hits particles and moisture, and it obscures the stars. So they worked with the city fathers and developed what were the beginning of light ordinances. And right now in the United States, there's about 10,000 local codes for outdoor lighting. And of course in Suffolk County now, all our towns have good outdoor lighting for new construction and for pre-existing. Southampton, Brookhaven, Islip, Patjog. Shelter Island recently passed a dark sky law. Southold has one. Riverhead, I think, was the first. And East Hampton Village and East Hampton Town.
How long has East Hampton Town had it?
Actually, East Hampton Town had a lighting code from 1984. And I thought that this was a law that could be brought to bear on my neighbor's floodlights, because it said the light source shall not be visible across property lines. But it didn't define what the light source was. And it wasn't really enforced. And I found out that in order for a lighting code to be, accurate and enforced, you need to have good definitions. Ones that can be, where there's no question. Because, if there's a code of any sort where it's not clear, it's not enforced.
Exactly.
So I learned how to
And they're
write.
not too good on enforcement in this town, period.
Well, well, of course, there's always lots of issues. But if you have a code that's technically correct, with meeting professional standards, then it's easier to be enforced. Plus, you need to go through an educational campaign, which I think we've been fairly successful with that. Even the Long Island Power Authority has a program about using night lighting more sensibly. It's called Light Solutions. And people can, call up LIPA and get free lighting plans from all the various manufacturers to meet our code.
But, the thing about that kind of thing is you've got to have the knowledge and the will to do something like that. For instance, you can have somebody who comes into your neighborhood who, comes from Queens or something like Brooklyn or something like that, where they don't understand anything about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're not used to. And they'll leave lights on that are very bright. And what do you do about that sort of situation?
Well, what you could do is you go to the town, and we produced a brochure about new outdoor lighting law for our homes. And it talks about the good reasons for them. It's better for safety, it's better for our rural character. Light trespass, is a problem for our sleep disturbances, because, this actually is a map of the United States. Now, the world is never dark all at once.
Yes,
We have the day and night cycle. And electric lighting, we have to remember, this is a new phenomenon. So for millions of years, all creatures, all plants and animals, humans, have evolved in a day-night cycle. It's called our circadian rhythms. Yes. And when you disrupt our circadian rhythms, besides the sleep disturbance, it also affects our hormones, including melatonin, which is a tumor suppressant. So light at night in our bedrooms actually has been shown to increase the incidence of breast cancer. So we should sleep in the dark. And if you have to have a light on, if you use a red colored light, it doesn't shut off the melatonin production. But if you wake up and you're turning on your bright lights, or if you have that bluish television screen, this interferes with your circadian, your natural healthy nighttime production of melatonin.
And your circadian rhythms, by the way, are also thrown off when you fly from zone to zone, which can be very difficult to adjust to, because your body is used to one particular set of night and day, and then you go somewhere where it's night and day is different, and it's a little hard to make that kind of an adjustment.
Well, the reason that I got involved in this issue so wholeheartedly is because it's really quite valuable in every respect, to protect our environment, to use energy wisely, for private property rights. I don't want my neighbor's lights, lighting up my property, and I wouldn't do the same. But also, it's cost effective. This isn't like, trying to clean water pollution, which is extraordinarily expensive, and you're up against all these industries, and for businesses, to improve their lighting, it becomes cost effective. There's a return on investment. In fact, I'll show you the types of fixtures that are better for directing the light where you need it. These over here are what many of the common lights have been in the past, where people weren't paying as much attention to the direction of light. But these send a good proportion of their light upwardly and out and over, and so you use a lot more wattage when you're spreading light where you don't need it. And then these fixtures over here are what we call zero uplight, or fully shielded. And you can see the bulb is recessed in an opaque shield. And all this light goes in a downward direction, and you can use less energy.
And it's, you know, a little less obtrusive
Yes.
into the whole neighborhood. you
Right,
know,
and
of
also it reduces glare, because when you have a light source right,
Yes.
you know, the bulb is right here, or even if the bulb's over here, what happens is your eye will always go over to the brightest light source. It's an autonomic response. And also it adapts to the brightest light source so that when you pass, you don't see as well.
That's right.
You know, it's like, you know, if you're at a birthday party and somebody snaps a picture, you don't see for a few seconds. And as we age, it takes longer for us to readapt. And also, you know those bluish headlights? After you pass them, you can't see as well. It's because blue lights sort of blow this adaptation out even more.
Wow.
So in Suffolk County, Jay Schneiderman just helped get a law passed. It was a unanimous decision in the Suffolk County Legislature to limit that bluish type lighting for outdoor light fixtures. I can't work on headlights yet. That's a whole different department, and it's a federal, you know, but for locally, we don't want to have those bluish type lights because they're not as good for night vision.
You know, there are some places that I pass. For instance,
Yeah.
even when I go to Gurney's, you know, I swim there in the wintertime, and I pass Hither Hills. And Hither Hills has such bright lights. I think
Yeah.
of you every single time. I say, oh my, should I call her up and tell her to get on them?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's a state park, and
Yeah, you know, and those went in, and I actually got a phone call from somebody who I can't say, and they said, Susan, they're buying all these unshielded fixtures. But by then it was too late. So I'm trying actually right now to get a state law passed, because, you know, we have different jurisdictions here. And even these schools and the firehouses, they have different jurisdictions. And so you've got state, county, and local. And all of them have to have, you know, what we call, you know, the sensible outdoor lighting regulations. So I'm working with New York State, trying to get some laws passed so that state-sponsored lighting would be, you know, would fit into that fully shielded zero uplight category.
you know, it is true now that I think about it. Every time I pass any place that is too bright, I always say to myself, should I tell her about that one? Really,
Yeah.
because
Call me up.
I think of you as the lighting cop.
Well, you know, I tend not to think of myself that way. What I try to do is explain to people, for example, this is a set of guidelines that's available from the planning department. And this talks about how you can go about improving, why and how to improve commercial outdoor lighting. And if you follow these guidelines, you'll use energy wisely. You'll have light where you need it in the proper amount. You know, that's also another thing. There's certain limits of illumination. You know, how many foot candles on the ground do you need to see well? And it's outlined here. You don't need 50-foot candles if, you know, 2-foot candles is recommended by the professionals.
What are foot candles? People don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, this is with a meter, which I could have brought with me. It's a small handheld meter. And a foot candle is the amount of light that's 1 foot away from a candle. So that's
You know, that
1
comes
foot
from
candle.
early stage lighting.
Exactly, of
Yeah.
course. And, but an average for a commercial parking lot is 0.2 foot candles. For any commercial parking lot, if you've got 0.2 foot candles as an average, then you can see well. And you also want to eliminate the glare, because people feel safer when they don't have bulbs, you know,
Yes.
right in their line of sight.
Yes, I agree with that definitely, that there is that glare is an unnerving thing, and will throw you off
Definitely.
rather than help you.
Yes.
So
It definitely interferes with vision.
yes.
And the whole thing about the dark sky, because it's not called dark ground, is that we illuminate the ground where and when you need it in the proper amount. That's all we do, is help people, you know, get that figured out.
You know, I don't know if many people realize, but because the Earth really was in a much more natural sequence of day and night before the electric light was invented, that what has happened is it has a tremendous effect upon bird migration.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
You know, and the truth of the matter is people say, well, you know, what do I care about bird migration? You know, people sometimes don't realize how important these things are in the whole scheme of the earth.
Yes, these
And
disruptions in the ecosystem have huge ramifications. And night lighting, they've documented birds are the creatures that are greatly affected by upwardly directed light because they migrate at night
Yes.
because of their heat buildup. And also they navigate partially by using the stars. And when lights are directed up, they lose their way. They also crash into lit buildings. They also circle in the fog. They will circle lit communication towers, you know, and to exhaustion and die. That happened over here at that LIPA plant in Bridgehampton. Do you remember when all those birds were dead on the road? They used to have these huge upwardly directed lights around this big tower.
LIPA did this?
Well, you know, LIPA also changed all their lighting. When Richie Kessel was the chairman, we had a ceremony over at the Bridgehampton plant where they changed all their, you know, massive floodlights to these zero uplight, and they've definitely reduced the light on that tower. But hundreds of millions of songbirds die every year because of misdirected night lighting.
God.
Oh, no, it's horrible.
And people don't understand birds are important.
Terribly important.
You know, I mean,
And, you
after
know-
all, they eat insects for one thing.
And also, you know, the Audubon Society, which is huge, huge membership, you know, especially in New York City after the pale male. Remember the hawk that was on Fifth Avenue?
Oh, yes.
Attracted a lot of attention.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Well, they have a very strong Audubon Society in Manhattan, and they produced a series of bird-safe building guidelines. And pardon my pun, but they dovetail perfectly with the dark sky recommendations, you know, about not wall washing, you know, glass buildings and thus and such, and turning off lights when you don't need them. I mean, if you see a huge office tower and every single floor is lit and there's nobody in there, you know, it's completely unnecessary. And it's a problem. I mean, a certain amount of lighting, you know, on the Empire State Building, you know, Times Square is always going to be overlit. But, you know, they keep saying the city that never sleeps. But you know what? The people in the city sleep. And,
Yes.
you know, we need to have better lighting.
So, going back to and talking a little bit more about sleep. I mean, we all have in our bedrooms, you know, I have a TV and, you know, where the cabinet is open when I just shut it off when I, you know, go to sleep. But there is a red light on
Yeah.
I didn't know that was the reason
Yeah,
why.
the red is okay. But if you've got blue lights, that could conceivably disrupt. And because they don't know exactly the threshold. They're still studying this. In fact, it's interesting to me that just in the last 10 years, they've started to conduct studies about the effects of light at night on humans and on other creatures. There was a study done out in California at UCLA, and every single creature that they studied, because you know most animals are nocturnal,
Right.
and they're usually studied during the day. There's a bias towards daytime study of creatures.
Because they're awake.
Because they're
The
awake, and they
are
can
awake.
see. But every single creature that they studied was very much dramatically affected. And in fact, when light is falling on water, you're going to have a greater growth of algae because the zooplankton doesn't come up to eat the algae when the water is lit. The zooplankton comes up at night to eat the algae.
Now, that's something I didn't know.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
But there's new things all the time. In fact, they just finished a study in LA. This is the most shocking thing. I mean, as if we don't have enough evidence, you know, to deal with night light, to get the lighting on the ground. They did a study, and when lighting is 200 or 300 feet in the air, which there's no reason for that, it actually prevents a chemical cleansing of air pollution.
Really?
I know, isn't that incredible?
Oh.
In any case, to get more local, you know, we did update our law in 2006 to have better definitions from that 1984 law. We still need another set of updates, amendments, which are, I'm hoping will be proposed in the new administration. And I don't see any reason why it can't be a bipartisan, it should be unanimous, no matter who's on the board. But you know that Councilwoman Quigley, since she was elected, has been trying to repeal our lighting code.
I'm not shocked.
Well, I know, among other zoning issues, but she hasn't been successful, and I'm pretty sure that these amendments that I've been working on with Sylvia Overby, the planning department, I mean, even Councilman Stanzioni, you know, understands that amendments may be necessary, but these would deal with some of the updates that we need and adjustments that we need for our business concerns. Because some businesses are having a more difficulty changing their lighting, so we can make some adjustments.
Why are
for
they
them.
having more trouble?
I think because they have larger properties and they have a great many more fixtures. But I have yet to see a property where we can't get a greater return on investment just, you know, within a few years by making the simple changes that are recommended in our code. But like I say, I mean, I can't imagine that there would be any objection to these amendments to our law. But there is no reason to repeal the law.
Well, that's wonderful news. I'm looking over here, by the way, at this map of the Earth in the dark, of course, which it never really is completely in the dark. And it is amazing that there are some areas that are so dark
Yeah.
and have so much less light pollution.
Well, there's actually not an equation, but it's thought of as being an equation of how many people and the lighting. But as we learn more and more about, like, look how lit up Japan is.
Yes.
You know, of all places to be wasting lighting, because they don't really generate electricity. They have to import the sources for electricity. But I think in some areas we're starting to see the lights not equate with population. It has to do with how they use lighting.
Oh.
But you know, the population is very low in mid-Africa.
Yes, I'll say. And also over there in South America.
In the Amazon.
Yeah. Well, it's more than the Amazon, though. It's north of the Amazon a little bit, right? That area right there, where it's really on the northeast coast there. Northeast coast? Northwest coast.
But they're able to measure, if you focus on the United States, they're able to measure the amount of light that's hitting these satellites. And their estimate, it's very hard to estimate what light pollution is costing, but they estimate between $3 and $10 billion a year is just wasted light. Wow. In electricity. And of course, for every 100 watts that's on dusk to dawn for a year, they're burning the equivalent of a quarter ton of coal. So,
well, not me, because I have solar panels.
You are totally solar.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I really believe in doing what I can.
Well, it's the using energy wisely and generating it wisely. And that's really the only thing we can do.
And you know, I noticed that that's something that I think city people don't notice. And when people come to my house who live in apartment houses in the city, they don't walk out of a room and shut the lights out because they live in apartment houses. So they're used to, constant kind of light. And they should have been raised with my father, who would always say, shut the lights when you walk out.
Well, we have controls now. There's two types of controls that are more and more being installed, which are the motion sensor, which you have in the ladies' room here. It goes on when you walk in, it goes off when you leave.
Yes.
And also they have a clock called an astronomic time clock. And this is something that would be really valuable for people to investigate and install for their outdoor lighting, because you can virtually set it for 365 different timings per year. For the whole year. You can, if you know when you're going to have a certain event at night, you just set it. But also, it only comes on at dusk. And dusk changes by a minute every day.
Yes, it does indeed.
So there's no sense in saying, well, I want it on at 4 and I want it back on at 6. You let this astronomical time clock, it pays for itself.
Wow.
Oh, there's
That's
so many
amazing.
wonderful technologies.
All right, well, I have one more question before we go. If there is any kind of light that does come into your room, should we be wearing those things over our eyes?
Well, my hope is that we don't have to. But yeah, if you absolutely have no way of preventing intrusion into your bedroom, you really need to have that pitch dark, because your eyes are not just for vision. Your eyes, light going into your eyes sets your clock.
I know.
The receptors are not just for vision in your eyes.
Well, I know all that stuff because I'm an old science teacher, but a lot of people don't know
No,
those things.
they
And
don't
they
think
don't
about it.
understand how important even the production of melatonin is. And the other thing I wanted to say is, what about moonlight?
Well, moonlight, well, you know, it's not, we don't have heavy moonlight all the time, but you know,
Yeah.
moonlight is 0.01 foot candle. At its brightest, you can actually see where you're going. I'm not advocating 0.01, you know, for walkways and you know, et cetera. But that's 0.01 foot candles, just for reference.
Well, also, sometimes when there's snow on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And you get a full moon.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You do, yes, it is a luster of midday to objects below, I believe is the way the poem goes.
But, you know, there are certain creatures that they have reactions to moonlight. You know, for example, the hatchlings of turtles in Florida, where they generally will hatch at night and they'll head towards the water because the moonlight will be reflecting on the water. But if there's lights from the condos and everything, they'll go the wrong way and get run over by, you know, cars or get lost. So they have a law in Florida during the hatching season so that people simply shield their lights. And then the turtles will go in the right direction because they're protected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife down there.
Oh, gee, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, the little turtles.
Yeah, well, we got to protect our wildlife.
Why, especially if it's easy and cost effective.
And we got to protect ourselves too.
Exactly.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
It was
you.
great. Love learning all this stuff.
It's fun.
And this group is